Long Ago and Far Away, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 18 by Anna von Reitz. Judging from some of the comments I'm getting, there are a lot of newbies out there. I suggest going to my website at annavonreitz.com or buying our primer, You Know Something's Wrong When, an American Affidavit of Probable Cause. Religion plays into the discussion because our law derives directly from our religious and ethical values, period. The last few posts I have revealed the apparently astounding news that there are different kinds of law and they all stem from different religions. Why is that so amazing to so many people? The maritime and admiralty law of the sea is linked to satanic pagan religions and goes back before the flood. The reason these are sometimes called the Noahide laws. The most basic recent overhaul and update of these laws occurred in Rome circa 200 BC, which is the reason they are often referred to as Roman civil law. These satanic law forms are far different from and follow a completely different logic from the law of the land, which is based on Mosaic law, or the law of the air, which is based on the law of love. Criminals have gradually usurped upon the law of the land and all but overcome it. They have done so by fraud, force, and deceit, but they have done it nonetheless. As Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, we live in a world dominated by courts operating under the satanic law of the sea and by an increasingly immoral, destructive, dishonest, and shallow popular culture. This is the situation we're all facing worldwide. At this crucial moment, I wish to draw your attention to the story of the Tower of Babel. Once, all the people of the world spoke the same religion. This allowed them to accomplish great things and to work together toward common goals. There were no separate tribes, no us and no them. War and courtroom battles and the constant quibbling we're so familiar with now didn't exist. We were all on the same team, and then something happened, the Tower of Babel. What really happened isn't explained in the Standard Bible, but the truth, revealed in other ancient texts, is that a strange woman came to rule in Babylon about 20,000 BC, which is about twice the length of time between us now and the reign of King David in Israel. She is called Semiramis, or the Queen of Heaven, also known as the Mother of Harlots and the Great Abomination, and the inventor of idolatry. A beautiful woman who crash-landed in an egg-shaped vessel that splashed down in the Fertile Crescent all those many years ago. She brought with her many changes for mankind, none of them good. Her changes included establishing a religion that venerated trees and sacred groves, and practiced blood sacrifices on hilltop altars, and especially favored infanticide as a common practice. She taught that sex was to be worshipped as a sacrament, and vast orgies began to take place. Drugs were liberally used to stimulate the mind and body. Crowds of thousands assembled to toss their crying babies into owl-shaped furnaces as sacrifices to Semiramis' familiar Moloch, the owl god. Worship of snakes, statues of penises, sodomy, temple prostitutes, and all manner of other practices got their start under her guidance. She also invented idolatry. Not only the kinds of idolatry we're taught about in Sunday school, with people carving statues and worshiping them. Oh no, it was much more insidious than that. Semiramis introduced the concept of money into the world, an idol standing for all other things, either in the form of little stamped and minted coins or in the form of graven images. This is the source of those graven images in your pockets right now, all those bills engraved with pictures of dead presidents. Semiramis took things of little or no actual value, gold coins and pieces of paper, and convinced people that they had great value because they represented the value of other things. A gold coin stamped with 3 baskets of wheat was supposedly worth 3 baskets of wheat, while a gold coin of the same size stamped with 5 baskets of wheat was worth 5 actual baskets of grain. It was a total scam then, and scary as it is for most people to contemplate the truth, it is still a total scam now, And you can thank Semiramis for conning every generation of mankind from her day down to this. No wonder she was known and eventually worshipped as the wife of Satan, the father of all lies. Anyone who could con a Babylonian farmer out of 5 baskets of wheat in exchange for a little gold coin had to be a truly legendary grifter. Another gift of Semiramis is what we now call descriptive language. The original language of this planet was based on mathematical truths. You couldn't tell a lie or make a false statement because every word reduced down to a fact, and they all added up or they didn't. Nobody knows for sure what the original language was called in ancient Babylon before the fall. That is, before Semiramis fell to earth from the stars. But it was preserved by the wise men of Parthia as an antidote to the descriptive language of Babylon called Babel. And among the Parthians, both then and now, the original language was called Parse. Both the beauty and the utter failure of descriptive language is that it can mean many different things and have many different meanings, and this gives rise to endless quarrels and questions and opportunities for us for misunderstanding, confusion, guile, and greedy manipulation. English is the premier descriptive language on the planet today, and we are the foremost victims of modern-day Babel. We can't seem to write a straightforward, honest agreement of any kind and have 10 people agree on the content. There are too many double meanings and possible interpretations to nearly everything. Let's take the word of, which can mean without, as in the sense of within or without, outside of, apart from, or belonging to. And then let's look at the word state of Florida. The original meaning of state of Florida was state belonging to Florida, but 2 generations later the meaning was changed to state outside of Florida, with nobody being made any the wiser and no change in the phrase was written. In 1864, Congress changed the meaning of the word state in all lowercase letters, states with the first letter capitalized, and United States with the first letters capitalized, to mean District of Columbia Municipal Corporation, and just didn't tell anyone either. These practices of employing double or triple or quadruple meanings to the same word created, quote, special definitions of known words, and using ambiguous descriptors leads our beloved English language being called doublespeak. Who can imagine that the words United States District Court actually translate to District of Columbia Municipal Corporation District Court? Well, maybe we would imagine it if we knew that Columbia is another name for Semiramis. And if you ask me to report on this subject in a timely manner, exactly what is timely? 3 days, 7 days, 2 months, a year, next decade? Well, we all know or think we know what descriptive language means, but in point of fact, we don't. And that, dear ones, is the reason that as beautiful as descriptive language can be and as attuned to the flights of our fancy as it is still Babel, and it is still at least double and often more like triple speak, and it is still intrinsically mutable, subject to being misunderstood, manipulated, redefined, confused, both innocently and on purpose. And at the end of the day, though we may all enjoy the poetry of a line like, "She walks in beauty like the night," we still don't know for sure and possibly don't know what to know, and possibly don't want to know what it means. Who is she? Is she walking like the night? How does night walk? Does night walk at all? Is the way night walks beautiful? What night are we talking about? You see, when you reduce English down, it's Babel, straight out of ancient Babylon. Most of the time it means absolutely nothing for certain. You can thank Semiramis and many, many generations of people, most of whom were cheated out of their food, their money, and their lives by Babylonian traders for the continued use and abuse of such language conventions. It turns out that grammar really is an important subject. Who knew? The ancient Parthians preserved the original mathematical language known as Parse as an antidote to this Babylonian drivel, and used it as the language of their sacred texts, which are mostly about astronomy, and all Parthian laws and business agreements. As a result, the Parthians were a thorn in the heel of Babylon for many generations, and were eventually all but wiped off the face of the earth by invading hordes of idolaters. Imagine a bunch of drug and sex-crazed Babylonian diamond merchants hitting the Kasbah on a Saturday night, their pockets full of gold coins stamped with images of baskets of wheat, horses, dates, donkeys, women, any little thing their hearts might desire, whispering sweet nothings, literally phrases that mean nothing, into the ears of women who then as now only think they understand the meaning. Two Americans, David Windmiller and Gould, rediscovered and to some extent re-engineered Parse, exposing once again the mathematical interface that honest communication should have built into its very structure. The result is very strange to our eyes and ears. Parse is written in all capital letters, marking it as symbolic language like ancient Latin. Like Latin, it uses direct punctuation to form connections between words and phrases. Unlike Latin, the information being conveyed can be reduced down to mathematical certainties with nothing left to the imagination. After a week of furtive study of this new iteration of Parse, I realized what a stretch it is going to take for most people to grasp its importance, especially as a language used to form treaties and agreements. Imagine contracts and laws that aren't subject to interpretation by anyone, much less a man in black robes. Maybe the first step is to realize that our beloved English language is actually Babel, and if we want to cut down on the criminality and confusion in the world, it behooves us to move on and learn mathematically interfaced languages and structurally correct grammar. Then at last, after 20,000 years of Babel, we can say what we actually mean again. I hope that readers now grasp the inevitable connection between religion and law, the unfortunate connection of Satanism and the cults of Semiramis with the law of the sea and the District of Columbia, and at least some of the ways and reasons that this extremely ancient history continues to impact our world and our lives. The culture of sex, drugs, and rock and roll that Semiramis unleashed in the Middle East 20,000 years ago is actually still kicking up dust today. It is parading down our main streets and corrupting our youth and creating a death-oriented and depraved society full of con artists and self-serving thieves. A statue of Semiramis herself stands in New York Harbor, mockingly masquerading as the Statue of Liberty. Note that liberty, the root word of libertine, is what sailors get when they reach port. It's not freedom. The great whore of Babylon, the great abomination herself, is standing where she should not be, just as Jesus said 2,000 years ago, pretending to be a beacon of freedom, when instead she is a shrine of enslavement. Her priests, disguised as honest jurists, have invaded our courts and taken over our court buildings. Our pockets are full of her graven images. Even our language is dishonest, twisted, and often meaningless because of Semiramis. Satan and his consort have had their way with us. Their minions snatched us from our cradles when we were just babies. Their followers have enslaved us and tormented and confused us all of our lives. They have stolen from us and oppressed us, lied to us, and lied about us. All these people know how to do is lie, lie, lie. And so far as the high priests of the Roman cult are concerned, the beauty of it all is that we don't know they are lying. We don't know our history. We mistake our enemies as friends. We adopt their idols as our own symbols. We believe in their money and don't recognize it for what it is. We didn't get the punchline when they set up shop as the District of Columbia. See this article and over 700 others on Anna's website at annavonreitz.com. To support her work, look for the PayPal button. You spell it ANNAVONREITZ.com. Words and Terms or Stop Being Stupid, Part 19 by Anna von Reitz. As we learned in Part 18, English is descriptive rather than factual language, and yet to be meaningful, only facts count. The rest is gibberish or babble, as in the Tower of Babel, subject to interpretation, context, and terms of art, and can be easily confused either innocently or on purpose. This creates a playground for con artists and lawyers. We're all familiar with the popular and common meaning of words, and also familiar with the use of trade jargon and with slang meanings of words used in English. A pop gun can refer to a child's toy, or in military parlance, a small piece of artillery. A slider may refer to a home run in baseball, or a miniature hamburger at a diner. A kid can refer to a baby goat or a child. A doll may be a toy or a living woman. A conveyance may be a legal document or a rickshaw or a truck. The meaning depends on in what sense you're using the word, or as Bill Clinton, the weasel, famously put it, and I paraphrase, it depends on what your definition of is. Some people actually thought that was cute. At the best times, the English language is a slithering and murky stew of possible meanings that we take for granted and sort through by context and common uses. It is the perfect medium for linguistic fraud. And linguistic fraud is what we've suffered here in America on a very grand scale. For example, back in 1935, Americans were told that Social Security was a retirement insurance program, and everyone assumed that the flannel-mouthed FDR was talking about their retirement as in secure old age pension for their golden years, but instead he was talking about the victims underwriting or insuring the retirement of the United States of America Incorporated debt. He was using purposeful semantic deceit to defraud Americans out of their constitutionally guaranteed rights and suckering them into profoundly disadvantageous private security agreement. Signing up for, quote, Social Security and thereby, quote, volunteering to be considered federal employees or dependents meant that people were also agreeing to stand as sureties, willing to pay off the debts of bankrupt private, mostly foreign-owned governmental services corporations, agreeing to pay federal income taxes, and agreeing to obey every piece of legislation issued by the United States Congress, acting as the board of directors of the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation. Here's the factual definition of United States in upper and lowercase and states in upper and lowercase referenced in all the various federal code statutes. The District of Columbia, Guam, American Samoa, Commonwealth Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, Republic of the Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Republic of Palau, Palmyra Atoll, Wake Atoll, Baker Island, Howland Island, Jarvis Island, Johnston Atoll, Midway Atoll, North Island, JACADS, Sand Island, Kingman Reef, and Navassa Island. The United States, in upper and lower case, being referenced through federal code, is not part of the United States of America. Your actual State of the Union is not one of their states at all, and it never was. Throughout the federal code, the words United States can mean only two things. One, District of Columbia, or two, District of Columbia Municipal Corporation. This is the linguistic fraud that has been at the heart of the vast commercial fraud and racketeering scheme unleashed on the American people by the Reconstruction Acts, followed up by the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, the so-called Federal Reserve, and the Bank of England. The only federal states are not states at all, but states of states, incorporated franchises of the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation. State of California in all capital letters, for example, and incorporated franchises of the District of Columbia. state of California in upper lowercase letters. The state that we think of when we say the word is the California state, small s in federalese. And its proper government is called the California state, upper and lower case on both words. Since 1864, that thing calling itself the United States Congress has not acted as a national governmental body in the framework envisioned by the founders, but has instead acted in the guise of a territorial legislative body under the loophole provided by Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. It has acted as the legislative body of the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation, that is, the Congress has acted as the board of directors for a private for-profit municipal corporation located in the District of Columbia. They have legislated everything in favor of their corporation under the guise of being public law without being detected, and they have gotten away with this since 1860. All this Babylonian doublespeak took root in the wake of an action which is another act of fraud carried out against us and against our innocent nation states, the so-called American Civil War, which was never a war but an illegal and immoral commercial mercenary conflict carried out on our shores. You can look all day and every day as long as you wish, but you will never find any proper declaration of war, and you will never find an official peace treaty ending the so-called American Civil War, which means that despite its ravages, it's no more of a war than the war on poverty or the war on drugs. It's a fraud game, a con, a crime. According to Black's Law Dictionary, first edition, the definition of fraud is some deceitful practice or willful device resorted to with the intent to deprive another of his right and in some manner to do him an injury. Fraud vitiates everything, nullifies everything it touches, and has no statute of limitations. All evidence suggests that the same perpetrators who staged the first American Civil War have been preparing to stage another commercial mercenary conflict on our shores. The leaders of the United States, that is, the District of Columbia Municipal Corporation, have spent billions of our dollars, underwritten by our assets and our labor, to build concentration camps on our soil, and by billions of rounds of ammunition and millions of body bags and coffins. They have armed their commercial mercenary agencies, BLM, FBI, FEMA, DHS, BATF, IRS, and so on, to the teeth, ready to wage another undeclared mercenary war against their innocent, clueless hosts. They have tried unsuccessfully for years to get something started, probably endlessly for some hot button, probing endlessly for some hot button issue that would ignite our streets and give them the excuse they need to start killing innocent Americans. They've tried to incite racial hatred, religious hatred, and economic hatred. It hasn't happened, and gentlemen and ladies reading this, don't let it happen. The unspeakable vermin responsible for all this graft and racketeering are desperate to kill their priority creditors, the American people. Killing one's creditors has major advantage for thieves hiding behind the guise of respectable government. 1, you no longer have to pay back the money and interest owed. 2, you get to collect on the $1 million insurance policies you've taken out on each American. 3, you can seize all the vacated and abandoned property left by those murdered. And 4, you can charge the remaining people, the sons and daughters of the victims, for the service. This has been going on under the noses of the mainstream media and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and yes, under all our noses too. They've been preparing to kill us and moving their operations to the Far East in Indonesia, getting ready to spring another trap. Circa 1900, the bankers colluded on a 100-year plan to seize, confiscate, steal, and otherwise control all the gold on this planet, and to use fiat currencies in the meanwhile to steal more assets via the inevitable cycles of inflation and deflation that are the hallmark of all fiat currencies in history. Finally, having ridden the fiat currencies into the ground, they intend to offer the solution to the problem they created, gold, and they have fully intended to sell all the gold that they stole from our grandparents and great-grandparents back to us at 5,000 to 10,000% profit. That's what they've been planning and implementing all these years. It's nothing but fraud from nose to tail tip. The money worldwide, whether gold or paper, is fraud, nothing but a modern-day form of Babylonian idolatry. And most of the governments are being operated in fraud too, little more than sanctimonious bands of robbers running around in uniforms, pretending to hold public offices when in fact they're operating as private corporate mercenaries illegally deployed on our soil. So what is to save us? We can save ourselves if we stay calm and resolute and keep the peace and let the rest of the known world know the truth and share it among ourselves. Why will such a simple approach work? Because everyone on earth has been harmed by these same monsters, from Tibet to Seattle, from Haiti to Nova Scotia, from Baton Rouge to Yorkshire, from Scotland to India, from India to China, from South Korea to Brazil, all around the world. These same vicious, self-serving, lying, cheating, worthless criminals have caused war and famine, peddled drugs and prostitution and booze, bullied and beaten and destroyed, just as you would expect followers of Satan and Semiramis, aka Columbia. Now they stand revealed. The apocalypse has come. Despite their efforts to disguise themselves as Americans and make the rest of the world hate us for their misdeeds, the truth is plain to see. They aren't Americans now, and they never have been. They are British inhabitants here to provide us with essential government services, just as the definitive Treaty of Peace, Paris, 1783 says. The responsibility for their actions rests with the British government and the Holy See, and both are fully culpable for all that has gone on here. It is their breach of trust that has brought this reckoning. Now they have the Americans coming for them on one side and the rest of the world on the other. We know who and what they are and in what capacity they are acting, and we are no longer deceived by their verbiage. Old Semiramis can print 100 baskets of wheat on any gold coin she likes, and there isn't an American from Portsmouth to Seattle who will do anything but look at it and laugh, because bit by bit we are waking up and remembering the difference between cow patties and shoe polish. P.S. I had someone write in and complain about the titles these articles are appearing under. The inference that people are being stupid. The author is offended. Too bad I'm not politically correct, right? The fact is that this fraud and pillaging has taken place illegally on our soil, and we've been paying the rats to do it to us since 1860. Got that? We've been paying them to pillage and plunder us. Millions of Americans are still slogging along like zombie sheep, paying taxes they don't owe, and obeying laws that don't pertain to them, and failing to operate their own government. If that's not stupid in large letters, I don't know what is. So let's all stop being stupid, stop letting these fakers ride us like circus ponies, stop putting up with being cheated and coerced and mischaracterized and lied about by phonies who have no granted authority to even speak to us, foreigners who have violated the only treaties and agreements allowing them to be on our shores, criminals who have pillaged and plundered and cheated the American people that they're supposed to be working for and protecting. Let's put them out of business once and for all. See this article and over 700 others on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. Support her work. Give generously via PayPal. You spell it ANNAVONREITZ.com. Look in the link below to follow along with this essay. It's the Language in the Court, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 20, by Anna von Reitz. I've been a big fan of Romley Stewart since I first became aware of him and the Australian group effort to unmask what is aptly called the Justinian Deception at JustinianDeception, WordPress.com. I had over the years researched the use of the all caps naming conventions and traced it back to ancient Rome and even wrote a treatise about it. But Rome focused on it from a slightly different viewpoint and came up with new insights and information that completed the picture, and also gave us the leverage to overturn the jurisdiction of the municipal and territorial courts. That is big, huge. That is the difference between knowing you are being bamboozled and being able to do something about it, and Romilly Stewart, an Aussie, gave us that. This points out the interlocking nature of the problem and the process throughout the English-speaking world. We have all suffered from the same processes and deceits, so that when we find something out in America, you can count on the fact that the same basic shtick is being employed in Great Britain under the UK, and in Canada under Canada, and in Australia under the regime of Australia too. The Holy See, the British monarchy, the Dutch Templars and renegade Jesuits, and the Lords of the Admiralty under the direction of the Lord Mayor of London have all contributed to the development and corruption of depravity of this international corporate crime syndicate, either by direct participation or by omission. If we track back through the history, we find that they are using a process of legal enclosure to usurp upon the land jurisdiction owed to the people, and that they have acted by establishing enclaves of sea jurisdiction on the land in contravention of what they are supposed to be doing. Thus, England, land, is not Great Britain, Admiralty, and not the UK, maritime, and we have the same problem here. The United States of America land is not the United States Dutch French Admiralty, and not the United States Dutch French Maritime, nor is it the United States of America British Admiralty, nor the United States of America British Maritime. Go anywhere you like in the world and you'll find these same coded jurisdictions being employed to rob and fleece the people of the land jurisdiction out of their rights and property by fraud and similar names, deceits, and most particularly the use of personage and barratry and false grammatical structures, both the use of descriptive language in contracts rendering them void and meaningless so as to promote interpretation by the courts, and the use of foreign sign language glossa to appear to represent people, when in fact a foreign sign of an account system operated by all those colluding and predatory and criminal corporations that are supposed to be providing us with good faith services. All the tricks that they are playing on us have been practiced by them before. The so-called income tax on corporations began as Peter's pence, a special tax employed by the church to pay for the Crusades. The process of hypothecation and using us to insure and underwrite the debts of government began under Queen Anne. The process of enfranchisement and the dehumanization of British people, reducing them to mere franchises and franchisees of the United Kingdom, as we see it today, began at the behest of Benjamin Disraeli and Queen Victoria. They used the credit that came from enslaving the British people by deceit to fund the Raj in India, using the enslavement of the people to one people to enslave another. This filthy business must be recognized for what it is and brought to a stop. And the jurists among us must be brought to a prompt and unequivocal understanding of the fact that they are themselves participating in capital-level crimes and offenses against humanity. As jurists, they well know the consequences of flouting the law in any jurisdiction, and they must be brought forcibly aware of the crimes that they are themselves committing. The most common crimes being committed by members of the bar are personage and barratry. These occur every time a living man in his estate is misrepresented by the name of an account brought before the court. This practice pretends that a living man is the same as a corporate entity, a crime known as personage, and it brings charges against the corporation and expects the living man to respond so as to trap him into paying the debts of a corporate franchise, a crime known as barratry. They also regularly commit crimes against the living people in matters of probate and foreclosure. Every so-called mortgage I have examined is void for linguistic fraud and meaningless statements. The mortgage contracts are illegal on the face. They are all unilateral contracts between a man and what is purported to be his own estate, executed under conditions of non-disclosure. In fact, none of the verbiage presented in the reams of the fine print holds water, and what the criminals are depending on instead is a secretive legal enclosure process of getting the victim to sign a trademarked piece of paper. In other words, the mortgage contracts are all void and fraudulent by nature, obviously so, but the content of the contract is not what these thieves have relied upon. Instead, they have trademarked and copyrighted their standard mortgage contract forms, and when the victim signs one of these without reserving their rights, the vermin seize upon their signature as enclosed property and claim that it has become part of their trademarked and copyrighted document owned by them, and they begin using the victim's signature as a rubber stamp for all manner of derivative contracts. This has the exact same effect as counterfeiting money. All this and more must be brought to a swift and certain end, and those responsible for this malpractice of justice, the maritime and admiralty courts and jurists, must be brought to an equally swift and unequivocal understanding of their culpability and role in this criminal system. There can be no doubt that in the routine practice of these courts, these men and women have participated in genocide on paper. Their crimes include inland piracy, conspiracy against the most sacred treaties and agreements among men and nations from the Magna Carta onward, unlawful conversion, chronic practice of personage and barratry, kidnapping, capitulation, grand theft, enslavement, war for profit, fraud of all kinds, and a host of other crimes too numerous to mention. The judges really have become the crooks and enforcers of criminality, and this has to be forced upon them by falsified records. And this has been forced upon them by falsified records and unrebutted commercial contracts that must be presumed to be private contracts between governmental services corporations and their purported franchises and willing clients. This entire situation has in turn been deliberately contrived and set up by private for-profit governmental services corporations operating in private capacities while appearing to be operating in public capacities. In other words, these private profit-motivated organizations have been passing off their public policy as public law. They have been ensnaring the people of each country into undisclosed private contracts and trust arrangements purporting to make the people the underwriters of the corporation's debts. This amounts to de facto enslavement and removes the victims from their natural status as landsmen and puts them into the position of being contractors in international commerce, all without being made aware of this change in political and material status. It is the ultimate false hypothecation of debt scheme, and it works in tandem with self-interested legislation by the boards of directors of these corporations disguised as members of Congress and Parliament. In theory, at least, these private corporate officers act as elected public officials simply by changing hats. But in point of fact, at least in America, they have removed themselves from the jurisdiction of the land by their acceptance of such corporate offices and are barred from service as fiduciary deputies of our actual states of the Union. They have been obliged to operate states of states, corporate franchises of the parent federal corporation instead. Also, it is worth noting that in America, members of the Bar Association are prohibited from holding any public office in our actual government by both prohibitions in the Articles and the Titles of Nobility Amendment. The number of bar members presently serving in Congress is ample proof that they cannot and do not represent our legitimate government, but merely a corporate impostor standing for or representing the actual Republican form of government we are owed. Please see the obnoxious and ubiquitous Pledge of Allegiance which generations of American school children have been indoctrinated with. I, grant of personal jurisdiction. Pledge, an ancient feudal act granting obedience and subjecting oneself to a monarch. Allegiance, another obligation of feudalism. 2, the flag, an icon and symbolic trademark of a commercial company at sea of the United States of America. A corporation masquerading as the deceptively similar name of our association of nation-states styled as the United States of America with a lowercase u in United. And 2, the Republic, our actual government, for which it stands. Since when does our actual government require a foreign corporation to substitute for it? 1 nation, we are actually 50 nations, under God. If it were Christian, it would say under heaven instead of God, which is an acronym for gold, order, and dominion. With liberty, liberty is the same root as libertine, and it's what British sailors get when they reach port, not the freedom Americans are owed. And justice for all. We can rightly infer that justice for all means enslavement for all. In the same way, generations of Americans have been taught wrongly that they live in a democracy and fed the impression that democracy is good and that we should be committed to spreading democracy throughout the world. Democracy is, in fact, another word for mob rule, which fundamentally disrespects the value of individual lives and unalienable rights and the existence of private assets. It is the antithesis of a republican government we are owed and equally the enemy of any true monarchy. In a democracy, if 51 out of 100 of your neighbors want to eat you for breakfast, they can. It is again a nasty, brutal, pagan, retrograde form of government that cannot be logically defended in modern times, and is in fact yet another excuse that the perpetrators offer for their crimes, the false claim that we ever knowingly offered to live in a democracy when we are owed a republican form of government. The sum total of this pernicious fraud and overall criminality results in what can only be described as a form of commercial feudalism, wherein men enslave themselves to the company store, are owned by it, and live and die within its confines, all without ever being informed of their presumed choice in the matter. It remains to be remarked that in America and the so-called United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, all the other analogous democracies foisted off on mankind, none of them have ever attained anything like the majority mandate needed for a democracy to function within the confines of its own definition. That is, there are no functional democracies anywhere in the world that I know of. So it is a lot of specious talk about democracy without a single actual democracy to back any of it up. Another fraud. Democracies don't actually exist in the modern world, so all this talk about them is smoke and mirrors, a claim of a form of government where none exists. Putting an end to this horseshoe is as simple and as difficult as educating the populace and those who are operating our governmental functions at the local level, then working our way up the food chain, replacing the corporate capos with our own legitimate public institutions as we go. In America, this is being done initially on a volunteer basis, with support for operations being donated by the people served. As this necessary reform gains momentum, we are seeing corollary efforts by the guilty parties to clean up their acts and reform the corporations. I personally hope that everyone concerned realizes that it's too late for half measures. See this article and over 700 others on AnnaVonReitz.com. Support her work with a generous donation via PayPal. You spell it ANNAVONREITZ.com. Follow along in the links below.